If you want to learn to play jazz, then nothing is more useful than checking out Charlie Parker. But you can learn a lot more than just where to put a chromatic note or what arpeggio to use. The 10 examples in this video will give you some examples of that, but it will certainly also really illustrate some of the concepts that I think really demonstrates the genius of Charlie Parker. This example is a line that you'll find in quite a few Parker solos, and there are a few things that you want to pick up from this. The first thing is that triplet arpeggios are really great. Here it's a G minor 7 arpeggio over a C7 chord with an F sharp leading note. But I think the main thing that you want to take away here is that 3-note groupings are a great way to create an interesting flow on top of the changes. Here he's playing some chromatic phrases and just repeating a simple 3-note phrase, but you can do this with a lot of other things, for instance, diatonic triads. This line is using D minor, C and B flat major triads as 3-note groupings on top of the C7, and that's a great way that you can take Parker's idea and then try to implement it into your own playing. Another thing that Parker uses very frequently, especially in blues, is to play relatively simple melodies and then just let the voice leading turn it into beautiful music and great melodies. He's really nailing the changes and telling a story by just changing one note. D to D flat, which is then telling us that we're moving from B flat major to B flat minor. And this really turns it into a great example of motivic development. You can also add some extra chords in your solo to get more movement in the lines. This line is from the solo on Billy's Bounce, and Parker turns G minor 7 C7 into G minor to G minor major to G minor 7 to C7, and even adds a nice trill on the first G minor triad. In fact, he's using the same technique in the theme, but with a different melody. It's also worth noticing how he changes up the sound by following up this harmonically dense line with a really basic F blues lick with a lot of repeated notes. Another example of using more dense harmony is this part of a rhythm changes solo. Using chromatic passing chords is something that didn't really become that common in jazz until after bebop, but Parker was of course ahead of his time. Here he's using a D flat minor 7 to go to C minor 7 in a rhythm change. He probably thought, as long as you get to the right place, then it doesn't really matter how you travel. The next example will show you how to take a simple 1-bar idea and then turn that into a 10 to 12 bar solid musical statement. I think this is amazing. He's playing a very simple arpeggio melody, repeating it and then developing it. It's a masterclass in how to develop a simple, basic melodic statement just using rhythm, and you can make a million variations of this, and it's probably all going to be solid. Let's check out another really strong use of an essential melodic technique. The line on this B flat 7 is really just using a D half diminished arpeggio, but then making the main motif a little bit more interesting with some 16th notes, and then moving it around where the first one is played on beat 3 with that upbeat, and then the second one on beat 2. Changing the last note also gives it a typical blues core response type of sound. Chances are that you're not practicing your diatonic triad inversions. Most people don't really go beyond the root position triads, and that's a pity because you can make some great lines with them. This is a fairly simple, short example of Parker using a second inversion C minor triad, and in general you'll find a lot of triad inversions in his solos, so just go practice those. You can thank me later. Here's another example where he's using a B flat major triad in the second inversion. The next example will show you two very common bebop devices that you definitely want to have in your playing. Here you have Parker inserting an arpeggio in a descending scale run. This way of breaking up scale runs to make them sound more interesting is all over bebop. And in this case, he's actually inserting an F major triad, which is a triad from the 3rd of D minor 7. So he's going from a basic descending scale run to something that sounds a lot more interesting and also really nailing the changes. There are jazz licks with chromatic passing notes, and then you have Parker licks with chromatic passing notes. Just check this out. Here's a lot more going on than just adding a chromatic leading note before an arpeggio or in the middle of a scale run. He's really using it as a part of the melody and working with it to emphasize certain things, adding chromatic leading notes also inside the arpeggios. And you really want to open up how you work with chromaticism, make it a part of your melodic vocabulary so that it's not just some mechanical gimmick that you use once in a while. Being able to combine arpeggios and triads and use different sounds and melodies on top of a chord is something that's also really essential, and also something that Parker, of course, does perfectly. Here, he's playing the arpeggio from the 3rd of B flat major 7, which is of course D minor 7, using a triplet arpeggio, and then using a scale run to transition into just a basic B flat major triad, creating a great flowing line. What you really want to work on is your ability to create interesting melodies and tie the whole thing together so that you're not just playing scales and arpeggios. And if you want to check out how Parker does this really well, just on a blues, using some basic blues phrases, but then really making it interesting, building tension and tying the whole thing together, then check out this video.